Resident Evil Village, the most recent mainline Resident Evil game after 7, and 2 remakes, and importantly, the continuing of the first person perspective in mainline games, which used to be a very contentious topic, and I'll be honest, it was something that I personally was very apprehensive before Resident Evil 7 came out. But after that game came out and just how good it was, then it wasn't really something that I was worrying about anymore. Even though I would still like to see the mainline games return to a third person perspective, but enough rambling, let's get on to the actual review, starting with the story. Here being a direct sequel to the story started in 7, following Ethan Winters looking for his family once again, who seem to get kidnapped more than Princess Peach. Now, bringing him to the village, which really works to connect the different areas of the game, as here it follows very much a linear story, but where there is a base area that allows you to continue the story or revisit earlier areas and maybe unlock secrets that maybe you couldn't before because you were missing an item necessary, much like in Resident Evil 7 or even some of the older Resident Evil games. As here, it seems to be doubling down on what I feel like is the idea of a more simple and accessible design of those original Resident Evil games. But more on that on the gameplay. Keeping on with the story though, another thing this game doubles down on is the campiness, with very kooky characters and well, let's call them eccentric plot twists. Also speaking of twists, not gonna lie, when I saw the trailers and promotional footage for this game, I got the idea that it would be wholly focused on the tall vampire lady. I didn't know if anyone else thought that, but I really thought that she was gonna be the main antagonist of this story. And that most of the game would revolve around her mansion and castle, kinda like the first Resident Evil game in a way. But that's really not the case here, and not to be too spoilery, which I think I'm already being, all I will say is that she's really just the beginning of it all, and that becomes very apparent very quickly. But regardless, getting back to it, I'll be honest, I do enjoy my camp in this type of game. Even the good guys here are a bit eccentric and maybe to a fault. For example, Chris Redfield is back in the game, and I feel like the whole plot would have been so much more simple if he was a reasonable character and not, well, stupid. There's also a moment in the story very early on where something so mind-bogglingly weird happens and it's not even acknowledged, and I was just like, well, this is either the most obvious hint to a plot twist, or this game has really just jumped the shark more than it already had, I guess. And it's the type of thing where if this was a more serious story, then this would have bothered me so much, but this time around the game constantly shows itself as being self-aware of how silly it is. Like for example, they even joke about the boulder punching Chris does in RE5, and because of it I found myself enjoying the journey regardless of it being dumb. And it's hard to talk about it in detail without spoiling, but let me put it in this way. If you played Resident Evil 7, there's a lot of familiar story beats, including that one 180 the game does near the end where it becomes almost like a different game. But even here it's slightly less jarring because as we get now into the gameplay, this Resident Evil is now once again turning into a more action focused game, because if there was proof that time is cyclical, it would be the Resident Evil franchise. But first let's get the basics explained. As you probably already know, Village is a first person survival horror game where there is a focus on health and ammo management, but because this time around there is that bigger focus on action, and with that I mean there is usually just more enemies in any given encounter and less in breathing time in between those encounters, and so to compensate for that you also have more ammo and supplies, which end up diminishing those survival elements for of course that more actiony feel. And while this might sound like a bad thing overall, it is something that can work. And I think for me the major factor to do this in a successful manner is you need to have a good pacing and variety, since you're going to be in combat a lot more, making it also just a lot more repetitive faster. But above that, also just the gameplay has to fit that more actiony gameplay, and unfortunately, I do think this is where this game kind of fails a bit, in my opinion, as things like reloads and fire rates just feel a bit too slow for this type of game. Here, still feeling very much like 7 with that kind of methodical horror gameplay, and so when you try to push it towards action, it kind of fails a little bit here. It's not too bad, because it also does get mitigated somewhat as you progress the game and you are able to upgrade your weapons and increase and decrease, depending on the stat of course, their values. But thankfully that's about it for me. At least in other ways I feel like this game succeeds really well. Pacing wise I found myself just playing through the whole thing in one sitting, but there's also very clear marks where you could segment it and still enjoy it that way. And then variety is surprisingly high here, and with what I think is the best part about it being just how connected to the areas the enemies you fight are, which I think is an upgrade from 7 where there it was just kind of big blobs of mold for the most part, even if that's what fit in that world and story. Here though we have the Maraikas, victims of Lady Dimitrescu experiments, and so you primarily see them in the dungeons of her castle. And these are probably the closest things to a zombie in this game, as other enemies like lichens for example do have some kind of special thing about them that affect how they move or attack. Things like, in this case, lichens are werewolves, which means they are faster and more aggressive, and also they like to hunt in packs. Yeah, lichens are the bane of my existence, and they are some of the hardest and also most common enemies in the whole game, due to them roaming the village, but also it doesn't help that even within each type of enemy there will also be subcategories of enemies like a lichen holding a weapon, or a lichen holding a bow and arrow, or a lichen with a really heavy armor. Yeah, lichens can do a lot in this game, but to be fair, there are a lot more enemies in this game, but I do feel because what I have said before, with their characteristics being dependent on the areas you find them, I do feel it would be a bit spoilery to tell you all about the other ones, especially since a few of them don't show up until the very end or very close to it. That being said, there is one particular location where it really feels like they skipped out because it has such an easy idea for new enemies to put in the specific area. Sorry, I'm trying not to spoil. The most I will say is it's an area that could have enemies very similar to the ones in the original game in shape, but they just kind of reuse lichens, and it's not even like it doesn't make sense story wise, but it just feels like a missed opportunity. Now, something here I forgot to talk about in the story is the flavor text that you get through the message that you found throughout the levels, and they're very enjoyable. It's not great writing, but it does what you expect out of flavor text really well, and in a way that doesn't hinder the progress. I feel like a lot of games take game notes or audio clips to just an absolute lore dump of a level that no one but hardcore fans would care about, but here I think it's done in a good way where it's mostly short things that let you in on some of the inner workings of the characters and their motivations, and also letting you know what's going on behind the scenes, in a way that it doesn't feel obligatory, but you always feel rewarded for stopping to read it, and it just doesn't waste your time. Moving on now to talk about the game in a more technical sense here, we have quite a variety of weapons compared to the original, but I'm gonna stick to talking about the ones you'll be seeing during your main playthrough. Of course, we have a pistol, a shotgun, a sniper rifle, and some more explosive offerings, and oh, of course, a knife. And what I will say here is usually in this type of game the pistol would have been the most used one, simply for the fact it's the one you get the most bullets for. But while that is still true here, the ability to craft different types of ammo really changes the pace up, letting you use more powerful weapons like shotguns a whole lot more often, rather than just, saving it all up for a boss, which is something I have a tendency of doing in this type of games. And adding to this, here almost every enemy, at least in normal difficulty, will drop something upon death, it being either items to craft ammo and health items or currency to use in the shop, which also allows you to buy ammo. But of course, not just that, you can also buy and sell weapons or any other item really. For example, bosses usually drop a very valuable item meant for you to sell. Then you can also upgrade your weapons and inventory space at the shop, which is a big deal because there's a thing about the inventory here in Resident Evil 8, and that is that there isn't a box, which I honestly had to double take when I figured that out. I legitimately thought I was missing something, but your main inventory is your only inventory here. And so it means that if you want to make space, you have to sell or drop items, which will happen. Weapons take a lot of space. But it's not all bad, as once you do sell something, you can just buy it back, albeit a bit of a loss. But at least in the exact state that you sold it in, like for example, if you had an upgraded shotgun with some attachments, then that's the state the game will be sold to you in when you try to buy it back. Which, to be fair, there's a very low chance of you doing, since usually if you are selling a weapon, you're probably substituting it with the one of the same type but better, hopefully. As weapons are really the major thing here, as things like health and ammo, grenades and things of that sort don't really expand all that much space in the inventory. Now, if I can give you some tips from experience playing the game to help maybe newcomers, I do have a couple that I think would have helped me a lot. One, and probably the most obvious one, is save the mines for bigger enemies. You might think this works well as a trap or to deal with crowds, which to be fair they do, but they do just so much damage and you can put them down so quickly that it is very easy to use them actively when being chased by, let's say, a mini boss. And against them it's very effective, so just do it, trust me. The other one, maybe not so obvious, is don't craft ammo for backup, because you can just craft ammo at any time and you can have an indefinite amount of crafting materials while ammo takes space in your inventory. Also, you don't want to end up in a place where you want to make a certain type of ammo but you wasted it all on the damned pistol. Speaking of items that don't occupy inventory space though, we of course have key items and valuables. One thing I thought interesting here was I found that some valuables can be combined to create an even more valuable item than the sum of its parts, which adds an extra incentive to explore and also making you just not sell everything at once you get to the shop. Now, going back to the key items, I think now we can talk about the puzzle elements of this game, and well, much like other Resident Evil games, these are fairly simple, but they feel very satisfying in a way that's like this thing that's been teasing you that you couldn't open before and you've been passing through it all game, and then suddenly you have the key or you have the one item that you can use to solve the puzzle and open whatever you're trying to open. And that's a very satisfying feeling, especially when you know there's going to be something either important behind it or just something very powerful for you to use. But I will say, because of the segmented nature of this game, at least to what pertains to the main story, I do feel that this effect is greatly diminished here. Thankfully, if you choose to do a lot of the side stuff, then you get this feeling in spades and you are greatly rewarded for it. This was a game I almost 100%ed without even feeling like I was trying to do it. It's just a thing that Resi games do really well, where going back to use that one item you just got and get a bonus that makes you slightly stronger and gives you that small dose of dopamine, and well, when it's happening a lot throughout the whole game, then that's a lot of dopamine. Now, the final thing I want to talk about, and that I failed to mention this far, is something that returns from Resident Evil 7, but it's a lot more important now, and that is blocking. Blocking in 7 was really just for harder difficulties and when playing in closed environments, especially with bosses, but here it is a lot more useful, and again because of that action focus. Using the Lycans as an example once again, these are fast characters and they will run at you and attack you quickly, and so the block will become an instrumental tool because it does insanely reduce the damage you take. And also going along with this kind of action thing, because there's also a lot more enemies on screen at any time, so it is a lot easier to just, be fighting one monster and just another one tries to attack you, and the block once again is very useful in a situation like that. It's honestly just surprising that it was even in 7, and I guess maybe they just always planned for this to go a bit more actiony. Who knows? Regardless, I really enjoyed the gameplay loop of this game despite its more action focus, but I don't think that everybody will. If you liked 7, it's not guaranteed that you'll like this one in my opinion, but I think an easy way to put it is, how much did the ending of Resident Evil 7 bother you? And if the answer is anything below, not that much, then I think you'll enjoy the gameplay here. Now moving on to the graphics, well, it looks great. To the point it doesn't surprise me anymore. Every game I have tried that uses the RE engine so far has been just really out there, especially with the level of detail in the character models, and this one is no different, and not only on a technical level but also aesthetically as well. It's so grimy and cold, it really adds to the scariness of the game, and also just the sheer variety from the pristine castle atop the mountain to the ravaged village, and going even deeper down the wet and echoey caves where the monsters are born. If this was a cyberpunk game, I would have said there was a political message here. That's a joke, by the way. No, but seriously, it's an amazingly dirty and scary looking game, and would be as scary as 7 if it wasn't for that action focus. I'm sorry I bring it up so much, but I swear it's just pointing it out in how it affects the game, and you will see in the score that it wasn't a big deal. Now, in a more technical sense, I played this on PC. It was my first ray tracing experience, and I will be honest, I had a really hard time telling the difference between it being on and off while just playing normally. I mean, it's cool, I'm sure it will be a standard moving into the future, but I do feel it's that kind of feature that shouldn't really be marketed so heavily, and I feel it only gets marketed this heavily because of the circumstances it finds itself in, being a very demanding feature for one, and also needing specialized hardware at the moment to be used, in a realistic fashion at least. But this video is not about that, so back to Resi 8. Well, I will say as of making this video, most of the major issues have been fixed, especially the major stuttering problem that was fixed in the pirated version of the game, but not the legit one for a while, which is very weird. But thankfully it is fixed now, even if it feels like it was some sort of call to action. But I will say that in my personal experience, and hopefully shouldn't bother you a regular player, is that this game hates me recording it. Every time I tried recording the game would randomly go into slow motion and totally break the game, and to this day I have no idea how I fixed it or if I fixed it at all, and it just wouldn't come back if I tried to record again. It is a very edge case that hopefully doesn't matter to you, but it is something I felt I should mention since I experienced it. Now moving on to the soundtrack, and well, it's a horror soundtrack. You know, strange violin noises and long unsettling synth noises. They are all here and it's good, but also doesn't really stand out in any way. And I preface that it's good, it's better than serviceable, but I don't think anyone is gonna be raving about it. It does what you expect out of a game like this, and it sounds scary, I guess. And overall, Resident Evil 8, while turning a lot harder towards action, it is still a horror game at its core, and more precisely a survival horror. And it's a good one. I really enjoyed my time with it, and I do plan on returning to it to just mess about with all the extras like mercenaries mode, which is just okay, that's why I didn't really mention it during the review, but more interesting to me the ability to unlock crazier weapons or infinite ammo weapons to use in the campaign and just have fun, you know? I feel a lot of games forget about that nowadays. You can have your cake and eat it too. Sure, I'll have a first quote unquote serious playthrough of the game, but let me mess about during the replays, and thankfully, Resident Evil 8 does that very well, like most Resident Evil games actually. And so now to score this game, I am giving Resident Evil Village an 8 out of 10. Yes, it's ironic, let's hope RE9 is a 9, and I would be happy. Now for reference, and I'm very much speaking out of memory here, I think I would have probably given Resident Evil 7 a 9, maybe a high 8. I do think 7 as a game is very tight all the way through design wise, except for their ending, and it really feels like an amazingly crafted experience, while this one budges sometimes. But it's only in a way that if I met someone who would prefer this one over 7, I would honestly totally understand them as well. Now, in terms of recommendations, well, I didn't end up paying full price for this game and I was very willing to do so, but when this game came out, things in my personal life were happening and I just couldn't do it. And when it comes to recommending the game, it's also very hard to just recommend a game that you can beat in well under 10 hours while doing most side activities to be worth that full price in my opinion, even with all the replay value. So personally, I think in a clean conscience, I would recommend buying this game under $40, which I think is a price that wouldn't leave me with any kind of buyer's remorse after beating the game, because I'll be honest, games are expensive now. Anyways, I kinda already said what my recommendation is if you're a returning player from 7, so regardless of your decision, I hope that you enjoyed watching, and if so, please consider subscribing and liking, and even commenting, all things you can do for free here on YouTube, and regardless of that, I hope you're having a good day, and goodbye. Actually, I want to ramble a bit because new console games here are now 80 euros, and I don't know how anyone thinks this is an okay price. I've been drifting hard towards PC gaming in the past few years, and I have not felt the need to look back when the difference is legitimately 20 euros on release day. Consoles used to be an affordable option, but with this and paying for online at the end of the year, I feel suddenly the prices are a lot more neck and neck, and PC is also just a tool to do other things like, YouTube, while a console is just stuck on that operating system. While I have nothing against console gamers, I don't see myself going back to console anytime soon, aside from my Switch, which even that has a competition now, so it's an interesting state of affairs right now in the gaming world. But hopefully with this competition it gets better for console gamers before it gets worse. But if all that fails, hopefully indies will still be around, and that's really where most of the unique and interesting gaming ideas are coming from now anyways. The experimental era of 3D gaming is behind us, and the standards have been very much set in stone in the AAA space. What will change that, I don't know, but whatever will be, will be. Bye.